down a few registers. Yeah, thanks for that introduction on Pamuch especially. I'm going to be doing that tour again, Dia de los Muertos, next year, and also the convent tour, which we did this year a couple of times, which turned out to be very interesting as well. So, welcome on International Women's Day. It's so interesting to be in a country where, just as Labor Day, it's a holiday that is recognized throughout the world, except in the country in where it began, the United States. So, always one of those strange things that we deal with. So, glad you braved the traffic today. It's great to see so many people. This is, I think, my 4th or 5th presentation here at the library, and it's great to see such a robust crowd. So here I am. This was actually the recent convent tour. So I've been a permanent resident here in Mérida for 10 years. Before that, I've been traveling throughout the Maya world, including Belize, Honduras, Chiapas, even Honduras, because I became fascinated with Maya history and architecture. So I still do some tours. I don't climb Temple 2 anymore down in Calakmul. I've kind of given that up after my most recent knee surgery, but still do some cultural and historical tours here in the area. In the United States, in my career, I was a sales and marketing executive. And in my experience, actually, many people have prejudice against marketing and salespeople. But I must tell you, for me, it made me a much better person. Made me a good listener, a much better listener. It made me a person who was more interested in not hearing myself speak all the time, but wanting to understand what the people out there in the marketplace are actually interested in. And so I can tell you that, in fact, my presentation tonight is very much based upon that principle. What is it that tourists and people who come down maybe for a month for remote work, what are they looking for? So I think that experience actually has been very helpful. And then recently, I've kind of taken all this experience and put it together. So I've bundled up a few services and have a business card now. So be happy to give you my business card at the end. And I do hope that you sign in to the sign-in sheet before you leave tonight. It's interesting that my experience in this field came about quite by accident. I had some good friends who were going back to the States and who have a colonial home 1 block away from Santiago Market. And they asked me if I'd be interested in managing that place for them for a year. And I thought, that doesn't sound like it's so bad. What could go wrong with that? So 3 years later, still at it with that house. And I can tell you that I've learned quite a bit and taken on a few other houses as well. And I think, like many of us, I still feel the need to get out into the world, still feel the need to communicate. And perhaps I should have been a teacher instead, but I thoroughly enjoy sharing my experience here in the Yucatan with newcomers who are here for visiting. It's to me, it's extremely interesting to meet people all around the world, because I tell you, I've met them. I've met them from Hong Kong, I've met them from Vietnam, I've met people from Finland, I've met people from all over the world in hosting Airbnb here. So I hope that rebounds to your benefit tonight in sharing my experiences. But a little plug, first of all, which I always like to do every year, for the Mérida English Library, and in this case specifically for membership. This is what I do. I like to really recommend membership. In this slide here, you can see it's up in the top left corner, there's the catalog. There's actually, I'm sure you've seen quite a few books here. And so a membership is quite inexpensive. And so if you would just check out one book a year and read it, you would save more money than your membership would cost. So consider becoming a member right away. So, after the introduction, what are we actually going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk a little bit more about than just Airbnb, because that's probably for most people a big part of the equation. But that model doesn't always work in all occasions, and it isn't the complete universe of options that you have. So we're going to be talking about property management a little bit in general, and other rental platforms that might be well suited for the property that you want to rent here in Mérida. I think by and large, the people that I've met who are interested in taking advantage of these rental platforms, they are interested in leveraging their investment, but they're our age. I don't meet many 35-year-olds. They're not looking for a new career necessarily in property management. They're not that interested in meeting every guest and perhaps going over to the property at 2 a.m. To meet someone who's been delayed out of Cancun. And that's actually happened to me, by the way. So, how do you reduce your stress? How do you maintain a moderate level of income? And how do you do it in a way that will increase your happiness, so to speak, in general? There's one thing that we're not going to talk about, because I'm not an expert, and this warrants a complete discussion on its own, are taxes. Because, we're talking about several different countries here. Everybody's tax situation is different. So you need to really talk to an expert, and probably talk to an expert, an accountant here in Mérida, and back in your home country as well. So it's really not something that we would be able to discuss in enough detail to give you any guidance. So, just like most things, what you decide to do is dependent upon what you actually want to achieve. And achieve mainly in life, it's not just with your Airbnb. How do you want this to fit into the bigger picture for you? Of course you want to protect and maximize your investment. And I put protect first, because again, I think that this is the key thing. And I don't want to talk too much, because I don't want people to get the wrong idea with Airbnb. I've never really had any serious issue renting to anyone on Airbnb. And so, we're talking about 1,000 nights or more. Just guess, I can't even remember anymore, and never had a serious issue. So I think that you can overdo that, but there's other things that are involved as well in terms of protecting your investment in your house. I think it is very important to maintain, and I have this very high priority, maintaining good neighborly relations. You don't want to be seen as the person who is disturbing, or who is attracting attention, or who is being reported to the authorities. That's not something that you want to get involved with. And we're going to talk about how that you can minimize the chance of that happening. Of course, it's extremely important to stay within the law. Don't try to go around the law. I'm going to let you make your own judgments in terms of perhaps renting directly to people. And I can tell you just one rule of thumb. I'm going to just mention it now. Just remember that SAT, that Hacienda, your friends at the tax department, they have full visibility into your banking records here in Mexico. So I would just caution you about that, not to say that you can't do what you want to do, Not to say that you have to pay taxes on everything that you rent, but just be aware of what you're doing. And finally, because it's just the kind of person I am, I don't like surprises. You know, when I was younger, I used to pride myself on, just give me anything you want, life. I can handle it. I've been through so many changes in my life. But when you become older, you actually become more honest with yourself. And I realize that I like predictable outcomes. And when you're dealing with one of the biggest investments in your life, I think that that's kind of what you probably want as well. And of course, this means that there is no one formula that's going to fit every person. And we'll talk about some of the aspects of this. All the houses here are unique. I mean, you've got condos, you've got apartments, you've got colonial houses, you have modern houses. They're all different. And you need to take a look at what you have. And of course, location is important, but location is something that you sell. There is more than one location here in town. And in fact, there are many people who come to town and would prefer perhaps not to be in Central. Believe it or not, particularly people who maybe coming from within Mexico, they're not necessarily that interested in being in a tourist location. They may have other things in mind. So, of course, that means you have to work with what you have. And that entails telling a story, to have a story about your house. With one of my houses, gave it a name. I found a name. And it was all about the history of the house. And so on Airbnb, I highlighted that. And so it gives it a unique character. And it's very important to differentiate yourself, keeping in mind what your audience is looking at. Tell a story about what you have. And then finally, have reasonable expectations. You're probably not going to become Bill Gates by renting your property on Airbnb. It's not going to happen. There are costs, there's maintenance, there are things taxes that you may have to pay. So just be aware that to have these reasonable expectations. And I'm going to talk, though, about how these expectations can change and how your income can go up over time. So sometimes it's best to be a little bit patient as well. I just want to do a sound check. Can everybody hear me in the back? Perfect. So, because I think that perhaps 75% or more of the rental activity in town is probably going through Airbnb. And what Airbnb does very well, of course, it's the biggest global platform. And they have tremendous reach. There's no way that you can be reaching people in Europe or Bogota or in San Francisco without Airbnb or potentially VRBO. It's just not going to happen. So I think it's very important to realize just how much that is worth. One thing we're going to talk about the costs here, but while it's on my mind, when a hotel actually has a property on Airbnb, do you know that they get charged 30%? So that hotel room that you may rent on Airbnb or VRBO, they're charging that hotel 30%, which is really just incredible. Since all these hotels do it, there must be a reason that they do it. It gives you an incredible amount of flexibility so that you can pick and choose on how you want to arrange renting your house. And this goes across several parameters. And one of those parameters is seasonability, so that we know that we're coming up on the low season, so that the way that you rent in the low season can be very much different than how you rent in the high season. But with Airbnb and with experience that you gain over time, you're going to be able to use all of this information to your advantage. And again, keeping the marketplace in mind, who is renting when, you can be one of the people who do this in the most intelligent way possible. Airbnb offers significant protection to the owners. They include liability insurance, up to $3 million in property insurance. If someone does something, damages something in the house or your property, there is even a feature on Airbnb where you can actually charge that person. And if they decide they're not interested in paying you for that, then Airbnb, for instance, will work as an intermediary on your behalf. So again, something very important potentially for you to keep in mind. They do, as I mentioned, report all income to tax authorities. And they do collect even local hotel tax, although owners are really not affected by that, really, at all. And the charges are typically, or almost exclusively, 14% to the renters. They're paying the bulk of the expenses to Airbnb. And the people who rent are paying 3%. So that's actually a pretty good deal when you think about it. Other rental platforms, of course, VRBO is a great secondary site. And I encourage you to as a default, to have your listing on VRBO. There's no reason not to. You're going to put the same information out there. You're going to be charged per activity. So it's really just a question of a little bit of a time investment to do that. Excuse me, I just need a little bit of a sip of water here. There are some niche platforms available as well. And when I say niche platforms, these are platforms that are out there on the internet, and people who belong to a certain demographic can be very interested in this. So Bring Fido, as you can imagine, pet owners would certainly like to have that opportunity. Kid & Co, if you have a property that is specifically amenable to kids, that's something to think about. Mr. B&B, which caters to the gay, lesbian community, something to think about. And CHBO, which is corporate housing by owner. And so for those who think that they might have an advantage in renting their house on a medium term or a little bit longer term to corporations or even people who are working remotely, that is certainly something to consider. And if your property does fit into one of these niches, it can be more profitable actually for you to rent on these. But this is where you're kind of getting into the 80-20 rule, or maybe even the 95-5 rule. In other words, how much time do you really want to invest in this? Because renting your house 6 months a year or 12 months a year, it does take a little bit of time. Somebody's going to have to do that work. And of course, I'm sure, who has not seen the local Facebook rental sites? You've all seen them, right? There's about 4 or 5 different sites here locally where people list their houses. So of course you want to list your house there, particularly if you are more interested in longer term rentals. And we're going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of that in just a few moments. And maximizing your income. And it depends, of course, on the goals that you have. And it does depend, you have to consider your tax situation. And the level of involvement that you're willing to put in. Because if you have, and again, I do think it's most likely that most of the people here in the room will use someone to manage that property. But you're not going to do it yourself. But that does cost a little bit of money. So if you're here 100% of the time and you have a house that's sitting there and you're a do-it-yourselfer, that's one way to maximize your income, is to do as much work as possible on the house yourself. And there are ways to structure that so you can get some help, but do the majority of the work yourself. And do you really want to maximize your income at all other costs? And of course you don't. There is kind of a limit to what you want to do. Physics is a limit. We're going to be talking about a few other limits in terms of how you rent your house. And so that, again, you want to maximize your revenue, but that should not be your sole goal. So, what everybody wants to know, how am I going to price my house? How am I going to price that condo that I have? There's obviously the very first thing to consider is short-term versus long-term rentals. And again, Airbnb and VRBO give you the opportunity to play around with this, so that, and the seasonality of it as well. So for instance, just the God's honest truth is you probably do not want to rent your house on a monthly basis or a 2-month basis on December or January. Why would you do that? That just, you're never going to be able to rent it to one person for what you could get for renting that out in these various weeks. It's a very high season, and so and perhaps there are times when a long-term rental is just not going to work in your advantage. Short-term rentals can be actually quite a bit more profitable, but it is more work. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. Thank you very much. Minimum stays is something that's key. I think for most people, a minimum stay of 4 or 5 days is fairly reasonable. If you make your minimum stays too short, you're putting a real burden on the system here. We're in the tropics. Preparing your house for the next person takes time. And I'll be honest with you, I will refuse to rent to someone who is coming in the same day as I have guests who are leaving that same day. That just does not work. I mean, and you're putting tremendous strain on the system. You're putting tremendous strain on the people who are working for you. And it's a risk that that place is not going to be ready when those guests show up. In fact, you want to be able to even perhaps have a little bit of flexibility. If people's flights arrive at noon and the house has been cleaned the previous day, the pool's clean, why would you say you can't come in here until 3 o'clock in the afternoon? It makes no sense whatsoever. No, welcome those people in. And you'll just find that minimum stays are very important, but putting them at too low of a range can be problematic. Weekly and monthly discounts. I think that if you go toward the shorter term rentals, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, what I found in some of my calculations, at least here in the houses I've rented, you may not even want to do a weekly discount. Now, a monthly discount may be different, but I would be very leery about just accepting the default recommendation from Airbnb. They always want to rent that place dirt cheap, and they want you to give the most ridiculous discounts. No, don't do it. It's just not worth it. So consider how this will work into your advantage. And again, if you're going to be having really a lot of long-term rentals, you may want to skew those into trying to build up your own clientele. One property I rent, this nice house, people keep coming back every year. They come back every year. They love the place. They don't want to give up their place, you know what I mean, to some other guest. They come back. And I've seen this, and I was kind of surprised by it, but this actually happens quite a bit, to have return customers that will stay for a month or 6 weeks, sometimes even 2 months at a time. So the long term is a little bit lower risk. There's definitely a lower cost. I mean, there's no doubt. Your cleaning costs are going to be lower. Your management costs are going to be lower. So I think that's key. I think your repair costs are going to be lower, so forth. There's going to be several things that are going to be lower cost. Again, there's a little bit less risk, but again, I think it's not an existential risk. It's just your feeling of security is more. Because again, I've never really had any big problems renting to complete strangers, basically. Cancellation policies are very important. And, you have to realize that we're not in Barcelona. That if someone cancels their reservation a week before, and they're rented it for a week, it's quite likely you're not going to find anyone. So I really lean towards the more stringent of the cancellation policies. You can always help someone out. You can suggest that they move their reservation. You can suggest they change their dates. But at the end of the day, if someone cancels on you and you're not going to be able to replace that income, you've got to say, okay, I'm keeping that 50%. I'm very sorry, but this is what this is how I base my income, and that's how it actually happens. I think you would get into a lot of problems if you were to make, particularly in Mérida, if you were to make your cancellation policies too flexible. So, using these parameters to set the nightly price, and of course, you've got to set that nice nightly price by doing comparisons. You've got to go out into the marketplace yourself. You've got to look at those 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath houses with a big garden and a big pool. That's maybe comparable to your house, your colonial house, or your new house with 3 bedrooms and 3 baths. You've got to go out and do somebody's got to do this work. And again, if you hand this work over to professional, they know how to do it. They know how to do this, and they can do it pretty effectively and efficiently. Also, understand that this is a process. This is not something that you fire and forget. I mean, this is something that you'll be tweaking over time. So, I think that it's important to set a good nightly rate. I think it's important not to set the nightly rate too low. I have been quite surprised, and I think a lot of it's been due to inflation, right, over the last year. Isn't it incredible how prices have gone up? I mean, I'm just astounded. I don't see it every day when I go grocery shopping. I'm not one of those persons. But in other costs in my life, it's astounding how prices have gone up. And you've got to keep up with that. You've got to charge the correct amount of money, and you don't want to undercharge, as I have suggested before. Superhost status. Does everyone know what that is? Airbnb? Okay. It's a key goal for Airbnb success. There are a small number of hosts or co-hosts who have superhost status. It's difficult to get. And for instance, when I travel, the wind's really picking up. Hope this means it's going to rain on you folks back there. When I travel myself, for instance, I don't look beyond superhosts properties unless I have to. I always go to that. And the key reason as a consumer to do that is that you want an experience as the consumer that you can trust, that you know that this person has built up this reputation, and it's not overnight. So that's why it's important to get that superhost status. How to get it? It's not that easy. At a minimum, you have to, on Airbnb, rent your house for 100 nights a year. You've got to maintain a 4.8 rating, which basically means almost everybody that comes through your property has to give it a 5.0 rating. Think about that. I will say that people are fair, though. If you have a little problem, you take care of it. People are very forgiving. I've been surprised sometimes how forgiving they are, because things just do happen, particularly in colonial houses. One other thing is you have to have cancellation rates of less than 1%. So you can't be too quick to pull a trigger on something if you change your plans. We have a trip coming up next month, Nora and I, to Europe, but I can't tell you how disappointed I was having chosen an Airbnb in Barcelona 6 months ago. All of a sudden I get a cancellation notice. So I go back to look, there's nothing available. It's Barcelona. It's crazy. So no, it does upset people if you cancel on them. And let's look at tips on maintaining this status. We're going to do that in a minute, but first, getting attention for your listening. When you do, you're going to have to do photos, and this is one of the key things. People are very visual. Do professional photos. Don't do them yourself on your iPhone. It's just not going to work. And do walkthrough, which means that you're taking pictures and putting them in order from as you enter the house towards the back of the house. A professional photographer is going to know how to do this, and there's a lot of photographers here in town who do this. And they might use a little bit wider angle, things of that nature. But this, you don't want to mess around with not having professional photos. If you're going to go to all of this work, you at least need to do that. Again, you have to tell a story about your place. What makes it different? Give your place a personality. You're proud of your place, right? You've put a lot of time and effort and money into it just by finding it yourself. Tell the world what makes it so special. It's very important. And people catch on to that. And so even if you have someone else write the description for you, make sure you pass along all this information. And sell the neighborhood. In some cases, it's kind of obvious, the neighborhood. But again, one of the places I rent that's very popular and people come back to every year is it's only a few blocks away from Itzias. Does everybody know where Itzias is? The street that comes up from the airport? But it's a beautiful home. Uber is cheap. 40%, if not more. People rent a car. So what is that neighborhood? It's peaceful. The streets are wide. It's clean. That's what you're selling. It's different than if you're selling something on, Calle 68 or something. It's different. And then highlight all the amenities. That's very key. And go through that several times. And when you do your comparisons, your comparables, check out what other people are putting as their amenities. So, talking about how to keep your super status and how to get it is really all based upon, or most of that is based upon your reviews. And so how do you get great reviews? Because we know it's extremely important. People look at two things. They look at the price and then look at the reviews. They may not look at much else. They'll look at the pictures. They're going to flip through those. But what's going to stick in their head? What's going to stick into their head is that, those reviews and the pictures. That's what's really key. Stay in touch throughout the visit, including before the person comes. That's really key. Make sure that the people really feel that you're there to help them. And it's not just something you're saying, that it's something you stand by. Make sure that they understand that there's open communication both ways. And do the small things, fix any issues ASAP. I think that probably seems to be self-explanatory, but you know what? If you get back to a guest within 15 minutes, do you know what that means to that person in terms of making them happy? People want to be heard. They want to be respected. They want to feel that you are giving them the attention that they deserve. And so this really goes to the people that you might even choose as a property manager. Think about that when you're interviewing people. Is this the person who's going to get right back to my customers? Think about using WhatsApp for your communications while you're down here. You may not want to just depend on email. Another reason to use WhatsApp is that they may not have a local phone number, and so that they may communicate where they can in terms of, or they're going to feel more comfortable communicating via Wi-Fi. They can call you via WhatsApp. You can talk to them. You can see their face if you want. Consider that when you first get in contact with that person, switching them over from email to WhatsApp. And also when I say stay in touch throughout the visit, I always find out not only when do they expect to arrive, but what flight they're arriving on. This is very important. How many times are flights delayed, right? And then not only are flights delayed, but you can go on to Flight Tracker. You can track that flight in real time. And so you can see exactly when that person is landing on the ground. You can even send a welcome text to that person. They land on the ground. Welcome to Mérida. Looking forward to seeing you in 45 minutes. I always ask them too if they're renting a car, particularly at the airport. Any hazard guesses as to how long it takes you to rent a car at the airport here in Mérida? It takes a minimum of 45 minutes, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes to rent a car here. So for you to get a really, listen, as a co-host, I don't want to be waiting for 2.5 hours. If that plane lands at 1:30, I'm not going to be there at 1:45. I'm telling you, I'm just not going to do it, particularly if they're renting a car. I know over time how long it's going to take that person to show up. A handbook with local information, particularly with restaurants, and keep those restaurants updated too with fresh information. That's really key. Things that are close, walkable distances, Santiago Market. One of the things I always tell people, particularly when they're not renting a car or something, even when they're renting a car, they get there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You know what people ask me a lot? Where can I get some beer? Where can I get a bottle of wine? And you know what I tell them? Go on to Uber Eats. Go to Chet Raleigh. Have them deliver it to you. It'll be there in an hour, hour and a half. And you can order all the stuff that you want, and it will show up. You don't have to leave. Relax. Go have a swim. Get ready to go out for dinner. Let Uber Eats deliver your wine. Be a local guide. Maybe I'm take this a little bit personally, but this is a tourist town. Be aware that people don't know. I'm shocked I ask people, well, what are your plans? Oh, I don't know. I'm going to walk around. Are you going to go to cenotes? What are cenotes? Believe it or not, I get that response all the time. Be prepared with day trips. Have 3 or 4 of them that you know. I offer people to make appointments for them, for a driver. When people ask me, should I rent a car? No, you shouldn't rent a car. You're going to rent a car for 3 days? You can get a driver for the day for $20, $30 more than it costs to rent a car. And they'll take you wherever you want to go. And they're going to, in fact, know where to take you exactly. They speak Spanish, by the way. They speak English. Or to get a day trip with a tour guide. Very key. People just eat that stuff up. They really do. So, amenities that are important for Mérida. We're not in Boston. The pool. One of the first things people look at. One thing that people have heard about Mérida. You know what they've heard about Mérida. It's hot as hell. They want to have a pool. That's one of your key amenities. If you have some furniture, some lounges, very key. Anything that highlights your garden, patio, outdoor living, very important. People are coming down here in December or January or February. They want to be in the garden. They're not like us. We live outdoor 365 days a year. But think about it. Your guests don't. To them, I mean, I can wear shorts. I can hang out by the pool. Just keep that in mind. The colonial modern features, make sure that you play those up. And it's helpful if you know, the stylistic features go throughout the house. I put it under amenities because I think it fits also here. Wi-Fi is, you know, if you've got 20 megabit Wi-Fi in your house and you're going to rent it to somebody, please don't do that. Please. Go out and spend 200 pesos more a month. I mean, people minimum are looking, what are they looking for? 100, 200. I think you got to get 100. You need to have 100. If you've got 100, then people can actually do work. They can do their Zoom. If your Wi-Fi is only available within 20 meters of your router, think about that. If there's an office and it's located so far away that there's no connectivity, that's not going to help you at all. You've got to find a solution for that. A washer and dryer. The way that people have luggage nowadays, they take their carry-on. They're not going to bring 3 big bags. If you have a washer and dryer, it's very nice. And a garage, because as I mentioned before, more and more people are renting cars. More amenities. A coffee machine with coffee. And one thing that I'm surprised is that people have coffee machines and then don't have coffee, or they don't have a coffee filter. You know, that's like torture. You know, why would you do that? They're thinking, well, this person doesn't like me that much. They're just torturing me. How am I going to drink coffee if there's no coffee here? You know, they're here on vacation. Bottled water. You may have a purifier under your sink, but I consider having bottled water, because people will be going out through the day. It doesn't mean you have to have bottled water for a month, but just have a bit of bottled water there. If you do longer-term rentals, think about a 6-pack of beer, a bottle of wine, some flowers. It goes a long way. A smart TV. Everybody's got Netflix. And if you've got a smart TV, they just sign in with their password, and they're done. They go watch wherever they are in the world. So make sure that TV you have is a smart TV, okay? And make sure it has good connectivity as well. And you're going to need at least a throughput of 20 megabytes where that TV is located so that you can actually do streaming. And a Bluetooth speaker. You don't have to run out and get a huge Bluetooth speaker, a little portable one that they can put by the pool or put by the desk or when they're in the dining room. That's fine. So yeah, think about a Bluetooth speaker. They're pretty inexpensive. Amenities that you might not want to offer. And I know this is going to be controversial, but there are some amenities depending on your situation. If you're planning to live here 6 months a year and then rent 6 months a year, you may choose to have these amenities for yourself. But if this is mainly an income property, or you say, well, this is going to be my primary residence in 5 years, do you really want to have solar panels up there? It's a huge cost. And you're not going to have that occupancy every day. What do I recommend to people? I recommend that you charge for electrical, that the guests pay for it. And the reason is that, you know, I've got a lot of guests that they'll be here for 2 weeks and they're going to pay $30, and that's no problem. But I tell you what, I remember having this one guest from northern Mexico, 4 people, 2 kids and 2 adults, 3-bedroom house. These people ran through 976 kilowatt hours in 8 days. That is more than I used in 2 months. That blew up the electrical bill for months, okay? So some people don't use it that much. Other people will drain your pocket. So, let people pay for what they use. Seriously consider this. If you've already got the solar panels, fine. If not, you might, and you're building something right now, maybe have it solar ready, but don't put the solar panels in immediately. There's no reason to do that. A dishwasher. And I say something like a dishwasher because all of these amenities that have moving parts and so forth, again, these, I've been here a long time, and you've been here a long time. These things need maintenance, and it's just a hassle. People can wash out their glasses, and reuse them. They're not going to be cooking anyway, which brings us to a wine cooler, which is the same thing. You're going to replace that wine cooler every 3 years. You're going to buy another beautiful piece of equipment, and then you're not going to get any use out of it, but it's going to sit there unplugged? No. And then finally, fancy ovens and stoves. Again, if you're going to live there, that's fine. Get what you want. But people don't come down here to cook. Very few people cook when they're here. And I can guarantee you this. They're going to cook very easy things. They're not going to be doing any French cooking down here. It's too dang hot. It's just too hot to do it. So moving along, protecting your investment. Don't book outside the platform. It's dangerous. You're going to get people who are going to try to get you to go outside the platform and rent directly to them. And they're trying to scam Airbnb. But if they're scamming Airbnb, are they going to scam you as well? Check the guests. It's not impolite to ask questions. Make sure you feel comfortable with the guests. Trust but verify. Had a person ask me about how big the Bluetooth speaker was. How loud does it get? Well, how loud do you need it to be was my response. Oh, we want to be outside. We want to have a loud Bluetooth speaker. Nah, reject. They want to have a party. No, we don't accept party people in the Airbnb, right? No. But people are generally good. Consider doing personal check-in and check-out. If you're charging for electrical, gives you the opportunity to get the beginning meter reading and the end meter reading, gives you the opportunity to actually physically see people as they come in, to check out the property as they leave. Consider doing that. And Airbnb and VRBO protections. If there's an issue, get on them right away. Make sure that you notify them immediately. It's very, very important. So, one of the big things people want to know about is, who am I going to get to help me with this? So what does the co-host do? Depends on what you want them to do. Now again, I think it is the 80-20 rule here that 80 or 90% of the people want the co-host to basically do everything. And I understand that. Besides, that's their job. That's what they're good at. That's not your job. So think about that. Do you really want to make it a quarter job for yourself? So maybe not, probably not. And of course it depends on the property itself. So how to choose that co-host? I've just got a couple more slides here. I have kids on my Ring. You have Ring at home where people push the doorbell. We have our neighbor kids who like to push the doorbell and then run away. So, does this co-host, this property manager, offer all the services needed, including cleaning and maintenance? And do they have the flexibility to do that pretty much any day of the week, which you're going to need because people are checking in and they're checking out? How many clients do they have? Of course you want them to have experience. Do you want them to be managing 60 other properties? Because, you're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 different people going to be, dealing with your property. If you want that, that's fine. And how flexible are they to your needs? Do they have a one-size-fit-all program? Or no, will they work with you to do something that's custom designed for what you need? What is their communication style? Are they abrupt, or they're busy, or they keep looking at their watch to get out of there because they've got somebody that they're checking in a half an hour? Not the best. And then, are they always available to you and your guests? Very key. You've got to have the person, you've got to be able to rely on that person to always be available to you. So what are the costs? For a high turnover or medium turnover and high responsibilities where the property manager co-host is doing basically all the work, they're going to charge you 20 to 25% in Mérida. That's the going rate. For standard needs, less responsibility, maybe longer term rentals, 15 or 20% is the norm, and that's what you can expect to pay. For property management only, where you're basically you're not checking people in and out, you're looking at 10 to 15%, but I don't think you're going to find anyone who's going to do much for you for 10% here. I mean, that would be the absolute minimum, and I would suggest that may not even be good. How do I turn this off? Because you really do want to have a level of service. One thing that's very key is repairs and maintenance. Almost everyone here in town charges 15 or 20% surcharge on all repairs and maintenance. And this kind of bothers me. I have to really be honest with you. I have a real problem with this. Number one, to me, it's a conflict of interest. I mean, they're probably using someone that they're paying already. They're charging you for that person's time, and then they're charging you a surcharge on top of it. Secondly, there's no incentive for that person to keep the cost of your repairs at a reasonable cost. So really think about this and have an open dialogue with this person on what that actually means. If you're going to repair your roof and it costs you like 30,000 pesos, you're going to be out 6,000 pesos just for what? That the person goes over there twice and takes a look at it? One alternative is there's a couple services in town, and I can vouch for one of them, where you can get a maintenance plan. It's at a fixed cost, basically. Get that, maybe. Look for alternatives. Get that, and then negotiate this with your property manager, your co-host. If they're not willing to work with you on a plan for yourself, really consider whether or not that's the kind of person you want to work with. Okay, so I said a couple more slides. That's it. Latitude Adjustment. Here are the things that I offer in the marketplace right now. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's great. No one fell asleep. Thank you very much for that. Thanks for signing in. I appreciate that. Of course, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to entertain them at this time.